this as brief as possible. I was a McDonald's manager. I worked at the McDonald's at Andrews Air Force Base, right across the street from the main gate. As soon as I got out of college, I went back to McDonald's and I said, listen, I know McDonald's, make me assistant manager. I'm fresh out of college, and boom, they put me at, that was one of the best McDonald's in the city. So I was a second assistant. I was making $17,000 a year, which back in 1981 was good money. All right. So anyway, I had got to a point where I was the night shift manager, and during that time, it was right when the arcade boom was hit.
Oh, Pac-Man and all that.
Yeah, and I loved playing arcade games, and I trained my crew to the point where it usually takes between 2 and 4 hours to close a McDonald's, and we had it down to 45 minutes. We were out of there. So anyway, I picked all my people, trained them, and everybody was into the arcades, and we would go and play arcades until the sun would come up. I get home, I still be wired. Howard Stern started doing DC 101. I was a rock fan. I love rock and roll. Love all music, basically, except for country. But I was a big rock enthusiast. I played in a band, actually, called Optical Perception, with 3 guys over 250 pounds, black guys playing hard driving, foot stomping, guitar screaming, rock and roll. And that's what got me through college, actually. Paid all my bills. But anyway, I would get home, and Howard Stern was coming on DC 101, and I was the first caller at like 5:30 in the morning, between 5:30 and 6. And one day, I said, he was saying, you know, you're the only black guy that ever calls. How come I don't have any more black audience? I said, because you don't have any black people on. That's your problem. He said, well, why don't you come on? He said, I have Robin here. And Robin's here each and every day, and she's black. And I said, well, Robin's a token, and I ain't joking. So he thought that was very funny. He said, well, why don't you come on? Robin's going to be out tomorrow, and I want you to come and give the black perspective of the news. So I said, no, and he cut me off. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, Darcel, my #1 fan, is going to come in tomorrow and do the news. I said, well, no, I'm not. Yes, he is going to come in. So anyway, they talked me into doing it. I was supposed to do 10 minutes. I wound up doing 3.5 hours. We stayed an hour and a half into the next DJ show. And he said, have you ever tried to do stand-up comedy? I said, no, I never even thought about stand-up comedy. I've been to acting school, and I want to do that. He said, go down to Garvin's, tell him you were on the show, and you want to do 5 minutes. I said, okay, I'll do that. Now, at that particular time, I thought Howard was a big deal. He wasn't a big deal to anybody but me.
Wasn't famous yet.
No, nobody knew who he was, right? He had only been on the air for like a month, right? But I thought he was funny as all get out, and I thought everybody was listening to him. So I go down to Garvin's, and I got my chest thrown out, and I said to the bartender, yeah, I'm here. I was on the Howard Stern show, and I want to do 5 minutes. He said, who? I said, Howard Stern. He said, listen, I don't know who that is, but if you want to do 5 minutes, sign that list right there, and then go over to those bleachers and sit and wait for them to call your name. That wasn't good enough for me. I said, is there a manager I can speak to? He said, yeah, the manager will be out in a minute. So the manager comes out, I go, yeah, I'm on the Howard Stern show just on that Friday. This was Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And he said, who? I said, the Howard Stern show, man. I want to do 5 minutes. He said, well, I don't know who that is. But if you want to do 5 minutes, sign that list. It wasn't good enough. Went through 2 other people. And finally I said, well, where's the owner? And they said, the owner will be in about an hour. So I wait on the owner of Garvin's Comedy Club, which ironically enough, he later became my manager. He walks in, And I said, listen, I was on the Howard Stern show Friday. He said, you were on, that was you that was on Friday morning? That was actually you? I said, yeah, that was me. And I want to do 5 minutes. He said, are you sure that was you that was on the Howard Stern show? I said, yeah, that was me. He said, you know what you need to do? You need to go over there, sign that list, and go sit in those bleachers with the rest of the people. Now, I have waited so long. This list was 3 pages deep. There was no room on the bleachers. There were 36 comics on the list, right? I'm number 37. I have to wait outside. There's no room. Finally, I'm waiting. I'm the last act on. I go on at 2:15 in the morning. They've already had last call an hour ago.
Yeah.
Okay? My audience consisted of a drunk, nearly passed out, a couple making out, and 2 dudes that was waiting on the last bus that had just came in. 2 brothers came in that had smoked some weed, and they were sitting in the back, and a guy vacuuming. That was my audience. The 2 black guys laughed at me. You know, they weren't laughing at my jokes. I would tell the jokes, and then they would look at each other. They were high, and they just started laughing, right? So anyway, I walked off stage, and I said, I'm never going to do this again. As I'm walking out, there was a guy named Jeff Jeffries that was the host of the show. And he ran behind me as I was going to the car. And he said, listen, that was funny. How long you been doing comedy? I said, well, that was my first time that I ever did comedy. He said, really? That was your first time doing comedy? I said, yeah. He said, listen, why don't you come back next week and don't sign up, and I'm going to put you in the middle of the show, and you do exactly what you did tonight, and I guarantee you, you're going to have a good set. And I went back, and I never stopped. And I killed that night, and I actually had to learn how not to be dirty and a lot of stuff. I just, for about a year and a half from that point on, I just got better and better and better and better and better. And 2 years after I started, I was a major headliner.
That's crazy. So, who influenced you to get into comedy?
Well, actually, I didn't know I was going to do stand-up, but my first influences in comedy were Jerry Lewis, and the first person I ever heard do stand-up was Bill Cosby. It was an album that he had called, I think it was called Wonderfulness. And a guy who later became my drummer in my band, he turned me on to it, and we sat down, and it was so funny. He was talking about the Buck champion of the world, and it was a thing where they did this go-kart thing, and everybody had theme, but it was just hilarious. And I got all of his albums, and he made me a fan of stand-up comedy. Bill Cosby did, and I got into Red Fox, and then I got into Flip Wilson, and then when Richard Pryor hit, that was it. Richard Pryor, I had to be where Richard was. My goal was to be as good as Richard Pryor. That was my goal, because he was the king. And my mom's always said, if you do anything, you reach as high as you can reach, and if you don't get that far, you're gonna go a long way. So that's my biggest influence, is Richard Pryor, and I am so blessed that not only did I get a chance to meet him, he was not only a mentor of mine, but he was actually a fan, and he taught me so much, and I miss him to this day. He was a great man, and he treated me like a son, and I loved him for it. and he couldn't remember my name, but I didn't feel bad because he couldn't remember his own children's names, except for Richard Pryor Jr. That was the only one he could remember. He go, this my daughter. This is man, I can't remember what. Rain Daddy. Yeah, this Rain right here. This Fat Funny. This Fat Funny. So that's what he called me. He called me Fat Funny.
Oh, wow.
And it was absolutely awesome to be around him. That was my biggest influence.
When did you meet the great Richard Pryor?
I met him. I was working on the Martin show. And what happened was Martin's then manager, a guy named Bill Branca, up at, he worked at, big agency.
William Morris.
William Morris, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. He worked for William Morris, and he had given me a card when I opened for Martin at the Capitol Center, which was the biggest crowd the Capitol Center ever had. It was 23,000 people. And the second biggest crowd in Capitol Center was for Elton John, and it was huge in my career, and it really skyrocketed me from that point to go on to better things. But anyway, Bill gave me his card and he said, "You know what? That was absolutely fantastic. I've never seen a comedy show that good all the way around." Because Martin had to follow 21,000 people standing and cheering me, and he had to follow, and he followed, and they stood and cheered him. So it was pretty awesome. And he told him to give another hand to Fat Doctor, which was really awesome for him to do that. But anyway, he told me when I get out to Hollywood, give me a call. You hear all that all the time.
Yeah.
But I get to Hollywood, call up Bill Brank. I said, Bill, I told his secretary, tell him it's the Fat Doctor. I figured I wouldn't hear from him for a few weeks at least. I could probably run into him at the club, so you know. But about less than a minute later, he's on the phone. Fat Doctor, what's up, buddy? You made it! You made it! I want to see you here tomorrow, bright and early, 10 o'clock. I said, that's bright and early. He said, that's bright and early for me. So I want you here 10 o'clock in the morning. I get there at 10 o'clock in the morning. He gets on the phone with the Comedy Store, and he says, I got the hottest comedian in town right now in my office. This guy's the Fat Doctor. He's a writer for the Martin Show. He actually started Martin Lawrence. There'd be no Martin Lawrence if it wasn't for this guy. I want him to get set up for an audition at the Comedy Store on Richard Pryor night. And the night before Richard Pryor night, I want him to have a 15-minute trial set for him to get acclimated to the room. And then I want him performing in front of Minty Shore to be a regular at the Comedy Store. Boom. I'm in town 3 days, and I'm getting ready to perform in front of my idol, Richard Pryor, on Richard Pryor Comedy Night at the Comedy Store. All right? So, and Mitzi Shore, who was the owner of the Comedy Store, and she still is the owner.
Pauly Shore's mother.
Yeah, Pauly's mom. So anyway, it was so funny when I went on stage. I had my head geared. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was supposed to do 10 minutes, and the guy came up to me and said, "Doc, you got 15." And I said, "No, I'm doing 10." He said, "Well, you got 15. That's up to you." So I had in my head, I'm doing my 10. I'm ripping this place, and I'm going to get this. Go up on stage. I do my first joke. Now, I could see Richard Pryor's silhouette in the back of the room, right under this red neon. Him, and I could see the silhouette of Mitzi on the back wall. because at the original room, most of your audience is to the left and to the right of you, and there was only like 4 rows of seats, 4 to 6 rows of seats, tables, and then a back wall that had seats and tables, and that's where Richard was, on that back wall, and I could see his silhouette. Now, at that time, he was just starting to be afflicted by the MS disease. Okay, so I did my first joke, ripped. The place is in hysterics. Richard laughed so hard he leans forward, and I see his head disappear. And then, as I'm going into the setup of my next joke, I hear him in the back. Should I use a superlative?
Yeah, this is YouTube,
Okay.
and this is
All right.
uncensored
Okay.
documentaries I use.
Well, this is what happened. I tell the joke, his head disappears, and then I hear him in the back as everybody's quiet. I'm setting up the next joke. He goes, "Push me up, motherfucker! Push me up! You know I got that goddamn MS. I can't push my goddamn self up. Push me up, motherfucker!" And his head popped up. It was so hilarious to me, but I couldn't laugh. I had to keep going, and so I went to my next bit. Hit the punchline, boom, head disappears. I'm going, oh my God, please don't say that again. He go, "Push me up. Didn't I tell you to push me up, motherfucker?" And then his head would pop up. And I got to a point where I couldn't even look in that direction. I just looked away because I couldn't take it. But even though I was looking away from him, I knew his head was going out of sight. And I was certainly, how many times I got to tell you to push me up, motherfucker? So, anyway, I finished my set. I'm coming off stage. A guy named Tim, I still talk to Tim every now and then, that was his assistant, comes over to me and he says, "Mr. Richard Pryor would like to speak with you. He wants to meet you." Now, I'm not gay, but I swear to you, at that particular moment, I got a raging boner. I do not know why. It wasn't sexual. I was just so excited to meet Richard Pryor. I've never been starstruck about anybody. I had opened up for big names, James Brown, which was my idol, Kool and the Gang, and the Four Tops, the OJs. I've performed in front of so many big names, and I've never been starstruck until that moment. When he said that Richard Pryor wanted to meet me, I had to take my hat off, and I covered myself as I walked over to him because I was immense. And I walked over to him, and I was so humbled in his presence. And I had my head down and went, I couldn't look him in the eye. It's like I wasn't worthy, And I said, Mr. Richard Pryor, and he reached up like this and grabbed me by my collar and pulled me down to him so my chin was resting on his shoulder. And he said, "You know what? You's a fat, funny motherfucker. You about the funniest motherfucker I ever seen in my life. And if anybody ever try to tell you different, you bring their ass to me. Now, I ain't in no shape to kick nobody's ass, but I still got the money to have that shit done." And I backed off and I raised my arms and I went, "Yes, did you hear what Richard Pryor said? Richard Pryor said I was one of the funniest people he ever seen in his life. I'm here. I'm here." Mitzi got up and she said, "I want you to sign some papers. You are a paid regular at the Comedy Store." I was the second fastest person to become a paid regular in Comedy Store history.
You know who the first was?
Roseanne Barr.
Not bad company.
Yeah, Roseanne. I'm the second fastest to make it to the main stage, which is the big stage. That room holds like 525 people.
Yeah.
And that was the Comedy All-Stars. So I made that in 2 weeks. And Roseanne made it her same night. Mitzi took her from the original stage right over to the big stage. It took me 2 weeks to get it. I was the second fastest. And 2 weeks later, I was in the big room, and that was where all the stars were. And about, I would say, 6 weeks later, I got a call from a guy that used to book the club. I can't remember his first name. I think it was I remember his last name was Day. I can't remember his first name. But anyway, he called me up. He said, Doc, and he gives me my schedule. He says, of course, you're on Richard's night, and I want to let you know that Richard Pryor has put you on his favorites list. There were only 3 people on that list. And what that means is you are one of the people he picks to follow him just in case he is not feeling well and he can't give his audience everything that he wants to give them. He wants to make sure his audience has one of his favorite comedians follow him. You are now on that list. And I was so honored. And he told me the list goes this way. The first choice is Paul Mooney. If Paul Mooney's in town, he will be following Richard Pryor. The second person is Eddie Griffin. Eddie Griffin, he pretty much adopted Eddie. He loved Eddie to death. If Paul wasn't in town or wasn't available, Eddie Griffin. If Eddie Griffin wasn't available, Fat Doctor. And if Fat Doctor was not available, Dice Clay. I bumped Dice Clay during the heyday of his career. 3 years I was here, I was pretty much bedridden. I finally succumbed to a virus that had attacked my heart in 1998, shortly after my mother died. I had a virus attack my heart, and they told me that it was damaged, and I probably wouldn't live 2 years. I was told in 1999.
Doctors aren't that smart, are they?
And, well, thank goodness. But I didn't start feeling really bad until 2 years prior to coming here. That's when it really, really got bad. And I had to, actually, 4 years before we came here, I filed for Social Security assistance because it was so difficult for me to work. I had so much fluid that I developed on my chest. It was hard for me to breathe, and I would just go out and do a gig and come home, and I would do that once a month, and it was just taking a toll on me. I got to a point where a couple of years before I got here, I just couldn't work at all. And when we got here, things got even worse. And a couple years ago, that's when I had a heart attack and a stroke simultaneously. That's when it looked like I was done for at that point, and they really didn't expect me to come out of a coma I was in for about 11 days. I was in a coma, and I came out of that, and then they gave me what's called an LVAD operation, which actually works the left ventricles of my heart, which had died. I was working off 1 of 4 ventricles. It's amazing that I was still living. But they put this in, it took them 9 hours to put this in. So I'm saying that to say that even though I've been here almost 5 years, the first 3 years, I was 85% of the time I was in the hospital. So I really didn't get into the comedy scene until this past year is when I really started to see exactly what's going on. And it's the same thing here as it is across the country. There is no unity among the comics like it used to be. There's no pride in the comics like there used to be for their city, for their surroundings. When I was coming up, DC was a brotherhood. Philly was a brotherhood. New Jersey was a brotherhood. Boston, brotherhood. I mean, you know, folks were proud to be from the areas that they came up in comedy. Atlanta was a comedy town where they were very proud of their comedians that were putting out. The Texas Outlaw comics. They were proud of coming out. And right now, everybody's so cliquey, and you know, that there's such a segregation among the population of each city. There's no camaraderie like it used to be in stand-up comedy. There isn't a pass the torch sort of a mentality like it used to be when I was coming up. The veterans helped the young guys, and then as you became a veteran, you helped the young, and that's where I got it from. I got it from the folks that were ahead of me that helped me, and that was the way I was taught to do it. So that's when I became a teacher, and if it wasn't for Martin Lawrence, I wouldn't have known that I could actually teach comedy. I knew I was a mentor, and I helped a lot of comics, and I mentored a lot of comics, but Martin made me realize that I could actually teach comedy. Because he said, no, I don't want you to just mentor me. How do you write a joke? How do you write a bit? You know, how do you put a set together? And my first reaction to him was, you know what? I never really thought about what it takes to do it. But let's figure this out together, what I'm doing. And because of him, I actually learned that I could actually teach comedy. So I'm always going to be grateful to him for that. And he was the second best student that I ever had. He was the first best for a long time. But he was incredible, and he had the fire that I've never seen in anybody else before. He wanted to be a star, and he wanted to be Eddie Murphy. That was something I couldn't get out of him. The fact that he didn't want to be Martin Lawrence. He wanted to be Eddie Murphy, you know. So, and I never broke him of that. Now, I don't know if he's still that way. He had been for a while. If you see anything Eddie Murphy was doing, Martin Lawrence would try to do. You know, I mean, even movies. Martin did Bad Boys just like Eddie did Beverly Hills Cops. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Eddie used prosthesis doing The Nutty Professor. And then he used prosthesis being Big Mama. You know what I'm saying? If Eddie wore little glasses when he was out, Martin wore little glasses when he was out. I mean, he just wanted to be Martin Lawrence. He wanted to be Eddie Murphy, and I don't know if that ever got out of him, where he would be his own person. You know, that was a problem, and that got him in trouble by him not being his own person. It led him to a personality crisis, and a lot of things happened, this, that, and the other, but I always love him, and without him, I would not have known that I could teach comedy.
That's cool.
So, and he'll always be my little brother, and I'll always be there for him, no matter what.
Amazing story. So can we talk about some of your other students, Wanda Sykes?
Wanda, I mentored Wanda. I didn't sit down and teach her. She was actually under the wing of a guy named Andy Evans, and she was a carbon copy of Andy Evans. When she was coming up, she sounded like Andy. Her delivery was like his. She wrote in the same manner, and actually, it took her a while to actually become funny. And I wish that she would let me have done more to guide her, but she did find her way. And whenever I would say something to her it's never like she would turn a deaf ear to me. She would always take stuff in, and she was always willing to learn. But I wish I would have been able to do more. And whenever she talks about me, she gives me way too much credit. She really does. I didn't do that much for her, but I took her on the road a few times, and she was one of my favorite people to. She was one of my favorite people to go on the road with.
So you're not surprised that Chris Rock kind of discovered her and put her on the Chris Rock show and gave her a start?
I'm not.
Not shocked.
She, her natural persona was funny and way fun. She was way funnier off stage than on stage, long before her on stage caught up with her persona.
I got that.
You know, she's just a funny person. So, Chris Rock put her on. It was just smart. He did a smart thing, because she's a funny person, and he definitely tuned in on the funny part of her. So
okay,
that was great, and I love her to death too. I do.
So somebody else that was on sitcoms a while, Patton Oswalt.
Patton Oswalt, another guy that I mentored. I had a lot of these guys under my wing for a period of time, some more than others. Actually, Patton Oswalt was in town. I heard he was looking for me and asking about me and wanted to know how the old man was and was I still doing it and was I doing better, you know, folks like Patton, I appreciate the fact that he appreciates the help that I gave him, you know. But Patton wasn't one of those guys that I sat down and I taught all the way through, but he was one of those guys that I led and I mentored him. And I mentored a lot of those guys, and when I would see them going in a wrong direction, I would bring them back on the straight and narrow. And they listened to me. All the folks listened to me, and that's why I do call myself DC's Godfather of Comedy, and so far nobody has given any rebuttal to that, as far as I know.
That's why we're interviewing you, man. Bonafide legend. So I definitely got to talk about Tommy Davidson in Living Color. Was a huge hit. You mentored the man. Is there anything that you'd like to say about Tommy? Or to Tommy?
Tommy is one of those guys where he is not your standard comic. He doesn't go by the rules of writing and creating. He's one of those guys that will come up with a premise and go on stage and work the premise out under the auspice of the pressure of the audience. And he will formulate his jokes pretty much on the fly. And the incredible thing about it is that as he was coming up and he was doing it, it was working. I mean, it's not a thing where like he would come on stage and go, "Doc, what'd you think of that?" And I go, "Well, you killed, man. What can I say? I mean, you're funny, you know." And I could not. He's one of those type of guys, like a Chappelle, like a Tony Woods. These guys, they didn't do it the standardized way, but what they did do, they learned structure from watching me. They learned how you put an act together by being around me. So I was an influence on those guys, an influence, a lot of influence on Patton Oswalt, a lot of influence on Dave Chappelle, Tommy. Again, a lot of these folks give me a lot more credit than I deserve. And if you talk to Tommy, he's going to say that I started him and I got him going and I this and I that. But he really was one of those super talents that was never went through that incubation period that most comics go through before they're funny. He was funny before he even had an act. He didn't even speak, and he was funny. The way he would put a beatbox together and sound like an entire band, it was just so entertaining and it was so funny. It's just no explanation for a talent like that. And he is a raw comedy talent that I would never want to tinker with that. I would never want to tinker with Dave Chappelle or Tony Woods. I don't know if you know who Tony is, because actually Tony Woods was a guy that was emulated by Dave Chappelle. Dave really thought Tony Woods was all that, and he pretty much patterned his style from Tony Woods. So, but those guys, Chappelle learned to be more structured as time went on, and he learned and he would ask questions, and he really grasped the concept of writing material much faster than I thought he would, because he was so offbeat. But even though in the midst of his offbeat thinking, I could actually use him as an example of a great technique comic. I mean, he has excellent technique, he has excellent fundamentals, along with being offbeat and being an avant-garde thinker. So I love Chappelle.
So here's a question about Chappelle. One of his first movies was Con Air, where he got thrown out of the plane. What do you, his mentor, think about one of his first scenes in a movie where he got murdered and thrown out of the plane?
I thought he did a great job, actually. I thought it was an excellent job. To me, that was his best movie role ever. That was incredible. He was funny. It was kind of sad that I think he was the first person to get killed, wasn't he?
I think he was, yeah.
No, he was the second guy to get killed. He was the second guy to get killed. Guy got killed at the gate when they landed.
Yeah.
And the police started coming, and the guy that was talking to what's his name, the lead criminal.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
He shot the guy right there in the head before they got back on.
It was